Women forced to give up their babies for adoption between the 1960s and the 1970s are ramping up pressure on the government to issue a formal apology. Despite the Scottish and Welsh parliaments having apologised to campaigners, Westminster has refused to accept responsibility. Around 185,000 women were affected by this. Among those was Jill Killington, who joins me on the programme now. Jill, hello, good to have you on the show again.
Hello, Vanessa. Yes, good to be on the programme.
So I know it's painful, of course it is. It's dreadful to ask you, but we need you to tell the story once more so that people will understand what it is you feel that you deserve to be apologised for. What happened to you and to all these other women?
Mainly my story is a familiar one. I was single and pregnant and deserted by my boyfriend. Along with thousands of other women, as you've said. We simply had not much say in the matter of our children's adoption. In my case, first of all, it was taken over by my GP, who said, this baby will have to be adopted. He then referred me to a church army moral welfare officer. The church army was attached to the Church of England. And she just took a few details and then referred me on to the National Adoption Society. And from then on, in my case and other women's cases, it was as if somebody had taken over our lives. We really had no say in what was happening to us. It was almost, the wheels were set in motion and it was a fait accompli. And that basically puts it in a nutshell.
Were you able at the time, Jill, to say to anyone at all, I don't want this to happen, or hang on a minute, nobody's asked me, or I'm not comfortable with this, or at the time, was it really the only thing that you felt could happen because you weren't in a position to really argue against it? What was the situation?
Well, I wasn't in a position really to argue against it. My parents wanted to send me to a mother and baby home, and I resisted that, having visited one. It was appalling. Mm-hmm. And my only comfort really was to stay at home.
Yes.
But nobody... In retrospect, yes, I could possibly have put myself out, but there was no financial support whatsoever offered, even though we found out years later there would have been financial support. But, I had no accommodation, and as I say, my life was taken over.
So Jill, when you say your only comfort was that you stayed at home, do you mean at your parents' home?
At my parents' home.
And your parents did not want to step in and say, nobody takes this baby away, or we would like to raise the baby, we would like to help Jill raise this baby. They just allowed this to happen. You weren't in any position to stop it happening. It was kind of done to you and for you without you playing any real part at all. Is that right?
Well, that is right, actually, because my parents were probably coerced as well. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, it was the most shameful thing that could happen would be for a single young woman to be pregnant and single. Mm-hmm. You brought terrible shame upon your family.
Just tell us which year this was, Jill, because people will be astounded how recent it really was, won't they?
Well, it was 1967.
All right, so this was right in the middle of the so-called swinging 60s, when the permissive society was meant to be on its heady way, when the pill was meant to be easily available, when, everybody was meant to be swinging and living in swinging London and Carnaby Street and the Beatles and David Bowie. It was exactly then, Mary Quant and the miniskirt. So we're not talking about the 1800s here. We're not even talking about the 1920s. We're talking about 1967 that this happened to you. I think people will find that impossible to believe, even though, of course, it's true. It's so awful, isn't it? It's so awful, my God.
You say the pill was invented. It had been invented. And I don't know if it was a postcode lottery or not. But to be honest, you could not be prescribed the pill if you were single. The pill would only be prescribed for married women who wanted birth control.
Yeah.
So, that was my story in a nutshell. After he was placed for adoption, I had to attend court to sign a legal document sorry, excuse me, to the effect that I would never, ever have any more contact with my son.
Yes.
That was what the law required. Adoption law required birth mothers to sign this form. So we were kind of left with the impression that we'd be breaking the law if we ever had contact with our children again.
Yes.
And so after that, most of us gave up hope ever of seeing those children.
And did you ever see your son again?
I did, yes. When he was 18, I put my name on a contact register. And 9 years after that, in 1994, he went to that register and he found me.
Yes. And how
so
was it?
we have now been, well, it was amazing, but very emotional. I mean, reunions, you know, some programs, Long Lost Family, almost make out that a reunion is the end of the story, fairy tale come true. But reunions can be extremely and are extremely emotional. It brings back the shame, the guilt, the anger, and all kinds of emotions, which is why this apology, which we have yet, well, will we ever get it from this government? I'm not holding my breath.
Jill, there'll be some people wondering, I suppose, why you're bothering. They might think, my God, this woman's life, the pain, the shock, the trauma, the loss, it's incalculable, you know, what was taken away from you, the way you were treated, how you must have suffered all those years. I mean, it just is so huge that some people, at any rate, will simply think, so somebody who had nothing to do with it at the time, for a sort of box-ticking reason, will say to you either in person or by letter or whatever it is, you know, we are sorry. But it won't give you anything that you lost at all. It won't give you all those lost years with your boy. It won't give you the respect and the compassionate treatment you should have had. It won't give you all the things that have caused you this terrible pain throughout your life. So why do you want them to apologise? And what would you say?
Well, for a start, I think an apology was the recommendation of the Human Rights Committee,
right?
Who heard evidence not only from birth mothers and adopted adults, significantly, but also a team of highly expert academic researchers. And the conclusion, Human Rights Committee's conclusion, was that a full, official, public apology should be given. And the fact that, because of the violation of our human rights, and the fact that they're now not giving this apology so far, I feel is yet another violation of our human rights. Right. What happened to us was humane. It was unjust. And an apology would just go some way to vindicate us and give us some justice. And it would go a long way, I think, to relieve the feelings that we've carried with us of shame and guilt, because so many adopted, and I know a lot of people don't understand this. I don't think anybody, unless you can imagine as a mother or a grandmother, losing a child in this way is something that most of us never, ever get over.
Absolutely.
We can never forget it. But so many adopted people have been told or imagined that they were rejected or abandoned. And this is so hurtful because they weren't. We loved our children. We had no choice. And I know a lot of people still believe this to be true. I mean, you hear the phrase given up for adoption. Our children were taken for adoption because we had no choice and no support, and it was beyond our control. And this is what we can't understand when the Scottish and the Welsh governments have given apologies because they took on the recommendation of the Human Rights Committee. We don't understand why this government hasn't. And we all know, obviously we know, it wasn't anything to do with this government, but they have it within their power, as previous governments have done, to give retrospective apologies for past historic injustices. And this has been the case, for instance, with the Guildford Four, the Alan Turing case, the dismissal of gay service people,
yes,
Sunday Bloody Sunday, and other things. It is within this government's power to issue this apology.
Jill, thank you very much indeed for stating, because every time I speak to you, it is unbearable. And you just try to imagine what those young ladies went through. It's unbelievable. And when the date was 1967 or 1927, 1937, 1967, right in the middle of the 60s, my goodness.